Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Ya lai 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 lai, ya lai 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 lai. Yai lie 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 yai lie 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 lie.
There is a Sanskrit proverb: look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life, the realities and verities of existence, the bliss of growth, the splendor of action, the glory of power. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. As we continue in this service, we prepare to take our metaphorical Torah out of the ark. Let this reading of Torah be like prayer, a meditation to remind us what we strive for, a chant that binds us to the chain of generations. Let the reading of Torah be like prayer, a moment of purest solidarity with our people's hopes and history, an invitation to affirm or dissent, to challenge or believe, to ask why or even say Amen. Let the reading of Torah be like prayer, flowing like waters that renew the spirit, refreshing the sweet to nourish the soul. Let the reading of Torah be like prayer, every word a blessing, every verse a conversation with God.
Ein chamocha v'Elohim Adonai ve'en kemaasecha. Malchutecha malchut kol olamim וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed L'Alafim, Nose Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh.
Adonai, Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed L'Alafim, Nose Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata
Each year, we read from the book of Deuteronomy on this sacred day, imploring us to choose life so that you and your descendants can live. As we read these words, it occurs to us that the text does not operate just on an individual level. It is a communal imperative. What does it mean to choose life for our generation and future generations? What does it mean to have a better life filled with better opportunities for future generations, leaving the world better than we found it? The Torah, as it so often does, calls us to action. We must choose life now. We must prepare now. We must take responsibility now. It is our best path to the future. We will hear 4 phenomenal Torah readers read this text: Aaron Alpern, Hannah Brooks, Sarah Gill, and George Zimmerman. And if you have your Machzor handy, you can find the words of our Torah portion on page 266. For our first Aliyah, I call up Doris Jacobson, who came to our community back in January, not knowing that a pandemic was on its way. But she has done such incredible work through the open tent, and we are so grateful for everything that she brings to our community. Tamo Devora Bat Eliukim Getzel Berakil Aliyah Rishona.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen.
אתם ניצבים היום כולהם לפני אדוני אלוהיהם, ראשיהם שבטיהם, זקניהם ראשות רהם, כל איש ישראל, טפהם נשיהם, וגר אשר בקרב מהניה, מהוטב עשיה עד שואב מימיה, לעברה בברית אדוני אלוהיך ובעלתו אשר אדוני אלוהיך כורת עמך היום, למען הקים אותה היום לא לעם, והוא יהיה לה לאלוהים האשר דיבר לה, ואשר נשבע לבבותיה לאברהם ליצחק ויעקב, ולא אתם לבדכם אנוכי כורת את הברית הזאת ואת העלה הזאת, כי את אשר ישנו פה עמנו עומד היום לפני אדוני אלוהינו, ואת אשר עננו פה עמנו היום.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
For our second Aliyah, and the Torah portion started on page 266. So if you're in your books, that's where we are. But for our second Aliyah, I'd like to call up Jaron Bruner on behalf of all of the wonderful work he has done with Speedy in our youth groups. Ya'amot Yaron Bereliet V'noritz La'aliyah Shniha.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amin, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
כי המצווה הזאת אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לא נפלאת היא ממך לנו רחוקה ולא רחוקה היא, לא בשמיים היא לאמור מי יעלה לנו השמיימה ויקחך לנו מינו אותה ונעשנה ולא מעבר לים היא לאמור מי יעבר לנו אל עבר הים ויקח לנו ויראינו אותה ונעשנה כי קרוב אליך הדבר מארץ מאוד בפיך ובלבבך לעשותו.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'haye olam netat betohenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. For our third Aliyah, I call up Susan Brooks, who has been an incredible leader in our community through the Social Action Committee with Family Promise and the drives that we've been doing and some of our racial justice conversations, and the list goes on and on and on. We are so grateful for everything that you bring to the temple. Tamod, Esther Bat David Vibela Aliyah Shlishit.
Baruch et Adonai Hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamavarach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
ראה נתתי לפניך היום את החיים ואת הטוב ואת המוות ואת הרע אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך ללכת בדרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו וכוחותיו ומשפטיו והיית ורבית וברכך אדוני אלוהיך בארץ אשר אתה בשמה לרשתה ואם יפנה לבבך ולא תשמח ונידחת וכי שתביתך לאלוהים אחרים ועבדתם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Baruch.
For our fourth Aliyah, for our last Aliyah, but most certainly not least, we have Gail and Elliot Schwartz on behalf of past presidents of our temple offering this Aliyah. We are so grateful to you, and we're grateful for everyone who has served our temple in such an important and honorable way. Ya'amdu Abigail Leah Bat Ruvain V'Chava V'Eliyahu Ben Chaim V'Etzet Sarah La'aliyah Revi'it.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
הגדתי לכם היום כי אבות תאבדון לא תאריכון ימים על האדמה, אשר אתה עובר את הירדן, לבוא שמה לרשתה. העידותי בכם היום, את השמיים ואת הארץ, החיים והמוות, נתתי לפניך, הברכה והקללה. ובחרת בחיים, למען תחיה אתה וזרעך, לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, לשמוע בקולו ולדבקבו. כי הוא חייך ואורך ימיך, לשבת על האדמה, אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, לתת להם.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
We are also going to spend some time looking at our Haftarah portion, which we'll be discussing as part of our Torah study in just a few minutes. But before we do that, let's hear its sacred words.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar bנביאים טובים, ורצה בדבריהם הנאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת וצדק. קרא בגרון אל תחשוך, כשופר הרם קולך, והגר לעמי פשעם, ולבית יעקב חטאותם. ואותי יום יום ידרושון, ודעת דרכי יחפצון, כגוי אשר צדקה עשה, ומשפט אלוהיו לא עזב. ישאלוני משפטי צדק, קרבת אלוהים יחפצון. למה צמנו ולא ראית, עינינו נפשנו ולא תדע. הן ביום צומכם תמצאו חפץ, וכל עצביכם תנגושו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות. האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הזיכרון הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ולענות עם עמו בית ישראל ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל ויום הכיפורים.
A huge Yasher Koach to everyone who read Torah and who had an Aliyah. We are so, so grateful for you bringing this wisdom and this joy to each of us. And we continue with a prayer of healing. We invite you to write the names of anyone who is in need of healing of mind, healing of body, or healing of spirit into the chat as we think of all of them and everyone whose names we keep silently in our hearts.
רפאנו אדוני ונרפא
חושינו ונבשע
אל קרוב לכל קוראיו
הקרוב לרעהו We pray for healing of the body.
We pray for healing of the soul, for strength of flesh and mind and spirit. We pray to once again be whole.
Now that we've heard the words of our Torah portion and our Haftarah, and we have an opportunity to spend a little bit of time just delving into what these words are all about. So we're going to come together to study some of these texts. As I get it open for you, there it is. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Give me just 1 second. Okay. And we're going to be looking at both the Torah portion as well as the Haftarah. There we go. So we begin just with this simple commentary over here that the Haftarah that we just read a few minutes ago, it's a prophetic passage that is a later critique of the biblically prescribed observance of Yom Kippur. So that actually is the story of the scapegoat that I had spoken about a little bit last night. That comes as well as some of the other texts. So basically what happens is within this text, we are asked, why is it that we fast? What is the reason that we're fasting on Yom Kippur? And it's not just because we're told to do so. It's really, what does it mean to fast for each of us? In the text that the Cantor so beautifully read a few minutes ago, it really is a reflection where the people are asking, why did we fast and you do not see it? Because God says, is this the fast that I desire? This not eating of food, but still allowing a society to act in a way that isn't indicative of Jewish values? And so as we go through these texts, both of our Haftarah and our Torah, know that we're going back to this question of how do we make our fasts today? How do we truly make them count? So this is the text that the Cantor read a few minutes ago, and I'm just going to read it again in English in case you were just following along in the Hebrew. Cry from the depths, says God. Do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a shofar. Tell my people their transgression and the house of Jacob their sin. Yes, they seek me daily, as though eager to learn my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not abandoned God's law. They ask of me the right way, eager for God's nearness. They say, why did we fast and you do not see it? We afflict ourselves and you do not know it. Because even on your fast day, you think only of desire, while oppressing all who work for you. Now I want to bring us back to the very first verse in what was just read. Lift up your voice like a shofar. And Rosh Hashanah, we heard those 100 blasts of the shofar. Some of us might have heard even more if we came back then again later in the day on Rosh Hashanah to hear the live shofar blasts. And at the end of today, when we finally reach the end of Yom Kippur, we will hear that one loud blast as well. But this verse here is a reminder of that. In our Machzor, it says, Isaiah is called by God to address the people with a powerful sermon that will resound throughout the community, as the ram's horn summoned ancient Israel to battle or sacred assembly. His words are intended to be as discordant as the shofar blast, shattering complacency and disrupting the normal ceremonies of the holy day. The prophet notes ironically that God pays no heed to the people's ritual acts of fasting and prostration. Their hypocritical displays of piety fall, as it were, on deaf ears. Only if these rituals were accompanied by humility, generosity, and care for the needy will God hear the worshipers and attend to their call. Thus, the entire passage plays in the theme of crying out and lifting up the voice. How does one effectively communicate with the Holy One? God, it seems, understands and responds to the language of compassion. And we'll see this appearing and reappearing throughout our text. Of course, we know that Yom Kippur, the entire day of Yom Kippur, just like the shofar blast, is meant to be a disruption to our lives. It's meant to make us stop everything that we are doing so that we can focus on what truly matters to us and to this world, and we can make meaningful change. As our text continues, it says, because your fasting is filled with strife and with calloused fists you strike. No, Your fasting this day will not lift up your voice before heaven. Is this the fast I desire? A day to afflict body and soul, bowing your head like a reed, covering yourself with sackcloth and ashes. Now, sackcloth and ashes, that actually has to do with mourning. When something terrible has happened, when we find out that a loved one has, God forbid, died, the first reaction was covering ourselves with sackcloth and ashes. It is a sign of mourning. And so on Yom Kippur, when in some ways we are confronting our mortality, that's why that comes up there. Do you call this a fast, a day worthy of the favor of Adonai? Is not this the fast I desire? To break the bonds of injustice and remove the heavy yoke, to let the oppressed go free and release all those enslaved. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to take the homeless, poor, into your home? And never neglect your own flesh and blood. So we'll read a little more of that, but before we do, I just want to go to this one commentary. Do not hide yourself from your own flesh and blood. Important kind of imagery there. So the Torah envisions a community that is based on a sense of social solidarity. And indeed, in our Torah portion as well, there is this sense of the entire community coming and standing together. Atem nitzavim, you, all of you, come and stand together before God. So the sense of social solidarity and common humanity. We are commanded to open our hands to those who are in need. Isaiah's words continue to resonate in our own day as a warning to the prosperous. If you hide the poor and the working class from your sight, you are apt to forget about them. You become self-obsessed and callous in your personal lives. You make political decisions that suit your own interests and ignore their impact on the majority of your fellow citizens. You live in separate enclaves of privilege, rarely interacting with those who live with far less than you have. And that way of life impoverishes us all. Do not hide yourself from your own flesh and blood, says the prophet Isaiah. Do not turn your back on the poor. Recognize your kinship with them. For the prophet, we are all one family, united in our humanity. Without one another, our community is not whole. And indeed, if we look at our Torah, we find that the commandment that we are told to do more than any other is to love the stranger, is to treat a stranger with respect. It's repeated in the Torah no fewer than 36 times, which is quite a lot. It could be very easy to not see all of our fellow human beings as our neighbors, but this is not even just saying that, it's saying neglect your own flesh and blood. Any other human in this world is your own flesh and blood. Then shall your light burst forth like the dawn, and your wounds shall quickly heal, your righteous one leading the way before you, the presence of Adonai guarding you from behind. Then when you call, Adonai will answer. And when you cry, will respond, I am here. If you remove the chains of oppression, the menacing hand, the malicious word, if you offer your compassion to the hungry and satisfy the suffering, then shall your light shine through the darkness and your night become bright as noon. Adonai will guide you always, slake your thirst in parched places, give strength to your bones. Now, I don't know that we necessarily agree with the theology here of essentially good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. If we do the thing that is right, it is not necessarily true that good things will happen to us. And if we do something that is wrong, as we all know, it's not necessarily true that something bad will happen to us. But still the imperative of compassion and bringing goodness into this world. There's another commentary based on this verse, if you offer your compassion to the hungry. The verse says, if you offer your nefesh means soul. If you offer, or in this sense, it's translated as compassion, but in its more basic sense, a nefesh really is just one's complete soul, inner being. So if you offer your nefesh to the hungry, which we might translate as, if you offer your life to the hungry, if you draw out your soul to the hungry, it suggests a profound giving of self. Not only the act of sharing food with those in need, but also sharing one's attention, offering empathy, understanding the warmth of human connection. The 11th century commentator Rashi explains that the phrase as an offering of the consolation of kind words. So fully giving of ourselves. I wanted to also bring us to just a little piece of the Torah portion in addition to our Haftarah, just to help us in our thinking here. So we heard, for this mitzvah, which I command you this day, is neither beyond you or far away. Now, the ideas that show up in Isaiah, the ideas that we can all talk about as a community in just a few minutes, might seem like incredibly lofty ideas. What does it mean for all of us to give of our souls to everyone who is in need? That sounds so enormous, it sounds impossible. But our Torah portion is kind of pushing and prodding at us, saying all of these mitzvot, which I command you this day, it's neither beyond you nor far away. It's not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven on our behalf and get it for us? And it is not across the sea, causing you to say, who will cross the sea on our behalf to get it for us? And let us hear that we might do it. No, rather it's very near to you in your mouth and in your heart that you can surely do it. So I'm not going to go into all of that now. I'm actually going to stop this. So what I want us to think about, hold on a second, there we go. What I want us to think about really is today, like the text of Isaiah is saying, is this really the fast that I desire, right? If the entire day of Yom Kippur, we're not focusing on apologizing, we're not focusing on how we want to make the world a more moral and just place, then the fasting means nothing. But what do we need to do in order to make this fast mean something? And so what I want to invite us to do is I'm going to break us up into breakout rooms where we can discuss this and we can be as personal or not as we choose to be, but it can be nice sometimes to just be with others talking things through. So I invite you to go straight into your room. I believe that you will be whisked away in just a moment. I guess you might need to actually hit the button to join the breakout room.